In the lead up to Resident Evil 3's launch, we've been looking at some of the characters who serve as the main players in its story. We've already talked about Jill and, of course, Nemesis, the two that the story centers around the most. Beyond those two, though, the character who probably has more of a presence than anyone else in the game is mercenary-turned UBCS soldier Carlos Oliveira, and here, that's exactly who we'll be talking about. While Resident Evil as a series has always had a tendency to bring back its major and secondary characters for reoccurring appearances in multiple installments, there are a few that have, over the years, had surprisingly limited screen time. Carlos is one such character, who has had a pretty big role to play, but doesn't really show up either before or after it. Little is known about Carlos's life before he showed up in Resident Evil 3. He was once a member of a guerrilla group somewhere in South America, where he was scouted by Umbrella Corporation, who would go on to recruit him for their Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service Unit, or UBCS. In September of 1998, a deadly outbreak of the T-virus tears through the American Midwestern town of Raccoon City, kicking Umbrella and its multiple arms into damage control mode. The UBCS is mobilized and sends over 100 of its soldiers into the city, seemingly with orders to rescue civilians and help them flee the crumbling city. What they do not know is that Umbrella, not surprisingly, had ulterior motives. Among its many soldiers, the corporation also sent in monitors, who were members of an internal investigation organization that monitored suspicious activities within Umbrella's employees. One monitor in particular was sent in with very particular objectives, but we'll get to that later. So, getting back to Carlos, who thinks he's been sent in to kill zombies and rescue civilians, things quickly fall apart for the UBCS. They are overwhelmed by how quickly the virus has spread throughout the city, and where Carlos had initially come in expecting to look out for civilians, he is now forced to look out for his own survival. During the fight, he somehow manages to get his hands on a radio and sends out a call for help, transmitting that he and his squad are being overrun. As luck would have it, this message is received by none other than Jill Valentine, who, at this moment, is in the STAR's office in RPD. Though there's no more communication between the two, Jill sets out from the police station, with Nemesis giving her chase, as she sets out to look for whoever it was that transmitted that radio message. Jill eventually runs into Carlos, and upon learning that he's a UBCS soldier, and given her history with Umbrella, she's immediately distrustful of him. Carlos, however, insists that he's just a mercenary and has no knowledge of Umbrella's inner workings. Seeing no choice but to work with him in order to escape the city, Jill follows Carlos, and the two of them arrive at a tram, where two other survivors of the UBCS await Carlos's arrival. These two are Captain Mikhail Victor, the leader of Carlos's squad, and Sergeant Nikolai Zinoviev, who, unbeknownst to all of the others, is the monitor sent in by Umbrella. His mission? Well, to gather combat data on not only the T-virus zombies, but also on the hulking bioweapon Nemesis, who's still searching for Jill somewhere in Raccoon City. Back to the moment, though. Jill is told by the UBCS soldiers that they can signal an extraction chopper at the Raccoon City clock tower, and the only safe way to get there is using the tram that they're in right now. To get the tram moving again, though, they need to look for some parts scattered throughout the city, and so Jill, Carlos, and Nikolai set out to look for these parts, while the injured Mikhail stays behind. During this search, Nikolai is caught in an explosion, leading the others to believe that he died in that blast. Eventually, Carlos and Jill return to the tram with the required parts in tow. As soon as the tram gets moving, though, they're attacked by Nemesis, still relentlessly in pursuit of Jill, now also having acquired the UBCS soldiers as his targets, since they seem to be working with her. Mikhail, however, makes the ultimate sacrifice here. He blows himself up with a grenade while Jill and Carlos flee ahead, with Nemesis getting caught in the explosion. Sadly, the sacrifice is for naught, and though Mikhail does get killed, Nemesis manages to survive the blast and emerge relatively unscathed. At the clock tower, Carlos and Jill successfully manage to signal the extraction chopper. As soon as it flies in, though, Nemesis arrives on the scene as well and blows it up with his rocket launcher. A fight ensues between Nemesis and Carlos and Jill. The modified tyrant impales Jill with one of his tentacles, infecting her with the T-virus. Carlos intervenes, managing to destroy Nemesis's rocket launcher and also temporarily injuring it enough to force it to retreat. Carlos gathers up an unconscious Jill and takes her to the clock tower's interior. He watches over her for 2 days, and when her condition only worsens, he sets out to Raccoon General Hospital. The hospital, as luck would have it, also receives funding from Umbrella, and as such is where the primary research for a T-virus vaccine took place, which is why destroying the hospital was also one of the missions Nikolai was sent in for. Speaking of Nikolai, he's still alive, because of course he is. While Carlos is looking for a vaccine in the hospital, he finds out that Nikolai didn't die in that explosion, and once he finally manages to get his hands on a vaccine and get back to Jill, once she's awake, he warns her that Nikolai might be still about, and that he's probably up to no good. Carlos and Jill part ways, looking for ways to escape the city. During this time, Carlos comes upon the information that the United States is going to launch a thermobaric missile at Raccoon City to wipe out the city and contain the spread of the T-virus. Carlos relays this information to Jill, warning her that they need to make it out quickly. But that's not all that Carlos learns. He also discovers that there's a chopper headed to Raccoon City, and that it's looking for Jill. Carlos somehow manages to get in contact with the chopper pilot, and learns that it's Jill's friend and her fellow STARS member, Barry Burton. Carlos tells him about their situation, and tells him where to land. He then scrambles to meet up with Jill. Things come to a head with Jill facing off against Nemesis in a final climactic fight, and managing to finally kill him. Jill and Carlos get aboard the chopper piloted by Barry, who then flies it away right in the nick of time as a nuke wipes the city off the face of the earth. Surprisingly enough, that's the last time we see Carlos. When we last saw him, he was still very much alive, so you might have figured that he might make some more appearances down the road, especially in games that put the spotlight on Jill, but he never has. We will be seeing him again soon though, when Resident Evil 3 launches on April 3rd. Capcom have said that the remake will be expanding upon Carlos, giving him more of a role and greater screen time than in the original game, and we can't wait to see what they do with him. Hopefully, they will also take this opportunity to plant the seeds for more appearances for him in some future installments as well. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.